Have you ever wondered why the narcissist always seems one step ahead? Why, no matter what you say, you end up feeling like you're the problem? Here's the truth. The moment you understand this one thing, their entire illusion collapses. They don't lose because you fought harder. They lose because you finally see them clearly. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Narcissists cannot survive without confusion. It's the fog that hides their true nature and keeps you questioning your own. When you're caught in their web, you find yourself constantly second-guessing reality, wondering if you overreacted, misunderstood, or somehow caused the chaos. That's not an accident. Confusion is their weapon. They use it to disarm you, to make you chase their approval, and to keep you emotionally entangled in their narrative. But the moment you gain clarity, the moment you begin to see what's really happening, everything starts to shift. Clarity destroys control. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, and it's not something the narcissist can fight with arguments. Because clarity doesn't argue, it simply sees. And once you see, you can't go back. When you're clear, you stop trying to decode mixed messages. You stop giving energy to endless justifications or false apologies. You begin to notice patterns instead of exceptions. You see that their kindness always comes with a hook. You see that every compliment is followed by criticism. You see that their love isn't love. It's a transaction designed to keep you loyal, and in that clarity, their power evaporates. A narcissist's control depends entirely on your confusion. They rely on you to doubt yourself, to think maybe they didn't mean it, maybe you misunderstood, maybe you're too sensitive. They condition you to replace your instincts with their words. But once clarity enters, you start trusting your intuition again. You stop eking validation from them and start finding it within yourself. Clarity makes manipulation visible. You begin to recognize the cycles, the idealization, the devaluation, the discard. You see that it was never about love, it was about control. The realization is painful, yes, but it's also liberating. Because clarity doesn't just expose them, it restores you. It returns your sense of truth, of identity, of emotional reality. When you're clear, you don't need revenge, you don't need to prove anything. You simply step back, detach, and watch the dynamic fall apart without your participation. The narcissist begins to panic, not because you confronted them, but because you no longer respond. You've taken away what they need most: your confusion, your attention, your emotional energy. Clarity brings a new kind of peace, not the fragile peace of avoiding conflict, but the deep, unshakable calm of knowing the truth. You no longer need to fix them or explain yourself. You realize that their chaos only has power if you let it inside you. And so you stop. You stop defending yourself against lies. You stop arguing with distortions. You stop carrying their guilt. And that's when everything changes. The fog lifts, the power imbalance dissolves. You see that the narcissist was never powerful. They only appeared that way while you were in the dark. The light of clarity exposes their weakness, their insecurity, their need for control. And once you know that, they lose the very thing they fought hardest to keep: their hold over you. A narcissist's power isn't real, it's borrowed. Every ounce of control they seem to have comes from the energy, empathy, and attention of the people around them. They draw strength from your reactions, your forgiveness, your need to understand them. They take your kindness and twist it into a leash. But the truth is, none of it belongs to them. Their confidence is an illusion built from the fragments of other people's self-worth. When you stop feeding that illusion, their power crumbles. They appear magnetic, charming, even powerful. But that's because they've learned to mirror what they see in you. They reflect your compassion back to you just enough to keep you close. They study what you admire, what you fear, and what you crave. Then they shapeshift to match it. For a while, it feels like they complete you, like they understand you in ways no one else ever has. But it's not connection, it's extraction. They're not loving you, they're harvesting from you. Their power grows every time you excuse the inexcusable, every time you silence your intuition to keep the peace, every time you believe that their pain is your responsibility to fix. The more you give, the more they take. But no matter how much they collect, they never become whole. Because what they're missing, empathy, self-awareness, accountability, can't be borrowed. It can only be earned, and that's something they refuse to do. When you finally realize that their strength isn't real, something incredible happens. You stop taking their behavior personally. You stop trying to rescue them. You stop seeing their control as dominance and start seeing it as dependence on your energy. And that shift in perspective is the beginning of your freedom. A narcissist cannot survive without an audience. Their ego needs constant applause to exist. When you stop reacting, when you stop engaging, when you pull our emotional energy back to yourself, you starve their false sense of self. At first, they'll push harder. They'll provoke you, guilt you, or play the victim. Anything to get your energy back. But if you hold your ground, their mask begins to slip. You start to see how empty it really is behind all that control. You start to understand that their power was never about strength. It was about dependency disguised as dominance. They needed you far more than you ever needed them. They needed your attention to feel important. They needed your empathy to feel human. And once you stop supplying that energy, they're left with what they've been running from all along, themselves. So the moment you stop feeding their ego, the illusion ends. You reclaim everything they borrowed, your peace, your confidence, your emotional clarity. And when that happens, the narcissist doesn't just lose power, they lose their source. Because the truth is, the light they tried to dim was never theirs. It was always yours. When you finally understand that a narcissist's cruelty is not about you, everything begins to make sense. For so long, you've carried the weight of their moods, their anger, and their silence as if it were your fault. You've replayed every conversation, trying to figure out what you could have said differently, how you could have loved them better, how you could have kept the peace, but none of it would have changed the outcome. Because it was never about you. It was never about your worth, your effort, or your love. It was about their pattern. Narcissists repeat the same cycle with everyone they meet. In the beginning, they idealize you, placing you high on a pedestal so they can later knock you down from it. They mirror your best qualities, pretend to share your values, and study what makes you feel seen. This stage feels intoxicating, almost magical. But it's not love, it's bait. Because once they believe they have you, the cycle shifts. The devaluation begins. Suddenly, your strengths become flaws, your empathy becomes overreacting, your independence becomes selfishness. You start questioning who you are because the person who once adored you now looks at you like you're the problem. But this isn't about something you did. It's about their need to control how others see them and how you see yourself. Narcissists are driven by insecurity so deep that they must project it outward to survive. When they belittle you, they're really shrinking the reflection that reminds them of their own inadequacy. When they manipulate, it's because they can't tolerate the vulnerability of being authentic. When they lie, it's not just to deceive you, it's to maintain the fragile story they tell themselves about who they are. Once you see that their behavior follows the same script, the confusion fades. You stop personalizing the pain. You realize that if it wasn't you, it would have been someone else, anyone willing to give them the admiration they crave. This understanding doesn't excuse their behavior, but it frees you from carrying their shame. Their words stop echoing in your mind. Their criticism loses its sting. You begin to recognize that their anger, their blame, their emotional chaos, all of it belongs to them. Seeing the pattern allows you to step back and observe instead of absorb. You can watch their tactics without getting pulled into them. You can hear their accusations without internalizing them. You can finally separate your identity from their projection. And that separation is where your power returns. Because once you know it's not about you, you stop trying to fix what you never broke. You stop chasing validation from someone incapable of giving it. You stop apologizing for simply being yourself. You understand that you were never too much or not enough. You were simply too aware, too kind, and too real for someone who survives on illusion. Their cruelty was never a reflection of your flaws. It was a mirror of their emptiness. And the moment you see that clearly, they lose the ability to define who you are. One of the hardest truths to accept is that you don't owe a narcissist closure. You may crave it. That final conversation where they finally understand the pain they caused, where they take responsibility, apologize, and give you peace. But that moment never comes because the narcissist cannot give what they do not possess. They don't seek understanding, they seek control. They will twist your desire for closure into another opportunity to manipulate, to reopen wounds, to pull you back into the cycle of confusion. The closure you seek from them is the very thing they will use to keep you tied to them. Narcissists view every interaction as a transaction of power. When you reach out to explain how much they hurt you, they hear something entirely different. They hear that you still care, that they still matter, that they still have influence over your emotions. It doesn't matter if your message is filled with anger or tears. As long as you're reacting, they feel significant. That's why closure with a narcissist never feels complete. Every time you try to end it, they find a way to pull you back into the conversation, to defend themselves, to blame you, or to promise that this time will be different. But the truth is, closure doesn't come from them. It comes from you. It's not something you receive, it's something you decide. You create closure the moment you stop needing their validation to heal. The moment you accept that you may never get the apology, the explanation, or the acknowledgement you deserve. And that acceptance doesn't mean you condone what they did. It means you've stopped giving them the authority to define your healing. The narcissist thrives on unfinished stories. They leave conversations open-ended, so you'll keep trying to make sense of them. They ghost you, then reappear just long enough to keep you emotionally off balance. They want you to keep wondering why, because as long as you're wondering, they still exist in your mind. But once you close that loop yourself, once you decide the story ends here, you take back your power. Real closure comes from truth, not contact. It's the truth that they won't change. The truth that their behavior had nothing to do with your worth. The truth that peace isn't something they can grant you. It's something you grant yourself when you stop waiting for their permission to move on. When you accept those truths, you no longer need to hear, "I'm sorry," to forgive yourself for staying. You no longer need to replay the past to understand it. You simply step out of the cycle quietly, fully, and without apology. And that's what terrifies the narcissist, not your anger, but your indifference. Because when you stop chasing closure, you stop giving them access to your emotions. You close the door, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Your peace becomes your closure. Your silence becomes your answer. And in that silence, you win. Silence is one of the most powerful tools you have against a narcissist. For people who thrive on reaction, attention, and emotional chaos, silence is not just uncomfortable, it's devastating. They rely on your words, your explanations, your defenses, and even your anger to feed their sense of importance. Every argument gives them validation. Every emotional response reassures them that they still control your mind. But when you stop responding, when you stop explaining and stop reacting, their illusion begins to collapse. Silence cuts off the oxygen they need to survive. At first, your silence will confuse them. Narcissists are used to provoking a response. It's how they measure their impact. They may test you with insults, guilt trips, or false apologies just to get you to react. They'll twist the story, spread rumors, or suddenly play the victim to lure you back into communication. They can't stand not being in your thoughts, and your silence reminds them that they no longer hold that place. They'll interpret your calm as arrogance, your distance as cruelty, because in their world, peace feels like punishment. But you have to hold steady. Your silence is not about punishing them, it's about protecting you. Silence means choosing not to participate in their chaos. It means realizing that your explanations will never make them understand, because they're not listening to understand. They're listening to twist, to weaponize, to maintain control. Every word you speak becomes another tool they use against you. When you remain silent, you're saying, "You no longer have access to my energy." It's an act of emotional maturity, of self-control, and of quiet rebellion. In silence, you reclaim your inner peace. You begin to hear your own voice again, the one that was drowned out by their constant criticism and manipulation. You start to see how much of your energy was spent trying to manage their moods or prove your innocence. Silence gives you distance, and with distance comes clarity. You start to realize that you don't have to explain your boundaries, you just have to live them. You don't need to prove your goodness, your peace already proves it. The narcissist will tell others you've changed. They'll call you cold, detached, or ungrateful. But what they're really saying is that you're no longer controllable. Silence exposes their weakness. Without your reactions, they have nothing to manipulate. Without your emotions, they have no mirror to reflect their false self. And when they can no longer provoke you, they lose interest because the game is over. Silence doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong enough to walk away without needing to be understood. It means you're prioritizing your peace over their approval. It's the sound of you reclaiming your power, calm, steady, and unapologetic. In the end, silence says everything they refuse to hear. You no longer have access to me, and that truth is louder than any words you could ever speak. Walking away from a narcissist is one of the most powerful and courageous acts of self-respect you will ever make. It may not feel like strength at first. It may feel like defeat, like you're giving up, like you're letting them win. But in reality, walking away isn't failure. It's freedom. It's the moment you stop fighting a battle that was never meant to be fair. Narcissists don't want resolution. They want control. They want endless arguments, endless confusion, endless cycles that keep you emotionally trapped. Choosing to walk away is the moment you decide that peace matters more than proving a point. When you're entangled with a narcissist, your world revolves around their moods, their validation, and their approval. You begin to lose yourself in the chaos. You tiptoe around their anger, you minimize your needs, and you start believing that your boundaries are unreasonable. They convince you that leaving them means you're cold or ungrateful, that you owe them another chance. But you owe them nothing. You owe yourself the life you've been too busy surviving to live. Walking away doesn't mean you hate them. It means you finally love yourself enough to stop being hurt. It means you recognize that staying will never change them, but leaving will change you. You stop chasing explanations that will never come. You stop hoping they'll wake up one morning and finally see your worth. You accept that their inability to love you deeply has nothing to do with your capacity to be lovable. You stop confusing pain with passion. You stop mistaking chaos for connection. The truth is, narcissists interpret your endurance as permission. Every time you stay after the lies, the insults, or the manipulation, they take it as confirmation that you'll always come back. But when you walk away, truly walk away, you shatter that illusion. You show them, and more importantly, yourself, that your boundaries are not negotiable. You reclaim your energy, your confidence, your voice, and even though it hurts, that pain is not destruction, it's detox. It's the withdrawal from emotional addiction. It's your soul remembering what peace feels like. They will try to pull you back with guilt or pity. They'll rewrite the story so they can play the victim and you become the villain. But you must remember, the narcissist doesn't miss you. They miss your supply, your attention, your reactions, your empathy. When you no longer provide that, they lose what made them feel powerful. Your silence, your absence, and your indifference are what finally disarm them. Walking away isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of your healing. It's the moment you start seeing yourself clearly again, free from their distortion. You realize that your strength was never measured by how much you could endure, but by when you finally decided to stop. Leaving doesn't mean you lost. It means you chose peace over pain, truth over illusion, and yourself over their control. And that choice, that quiet, steady, final step away, is the most powerful victory of all.